All right, switching tracks quite literally now, and time now for us to look ahead to the inaugural Indian Grand Prix. Now, when you talk about Formula One, the first name that comes to your mind is probably Michael Schumacher. But before Schumacher, the man synonymous with the sport was Ayrton Senna. The legendary Brazilian's journey has now been documented in a movie with some never-seen-before footage.
I came to Europe to compete for the first time. It was pure driving, it was real racing, and that makes me happy.
Words that became the mantra for countless race car drivers around the world. The words of probably the greatest racing car driver ever, Ayrton Senna. The legendary Brazilian's journey has now been documented in a film directed by BAFTA-winning British-Indian filmmaker Asif Kapadia, who's dug deep into the archives to retrieve some never-seen-before footage.
How do you feel about being world champion?
It's not a bad feeling at all, is it?
So have any of your girlfriends ever asked you to go faster?
Yeah.
It just felt like a movie. You know, we kept looking at one another saying, if we had scripted this, no one would believe us.
Kapadia's film follows the charismatic racing icon from his Formula One debut at the 1984 Monaco Grand Prix, leading up to his fatal crash at the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix that killed him at the age of 34. Senna the movie is set to be screened in India during the Indian Grand Prix this year. Your chance to get up close and personal with a man who lived and died for speed. Well, I can tell you this, everyone who's seen the documentary say it gave them goosebumps. And NDTV's Nikhil Naz actually had the opportunity to meet the producer and the screenwriter of the film, Manish Pandey, for whom this film is a tribute to one of his personal heroes.
It was real racing, and that makes me happy.
Right, Manish, from a doctor to a filmmaker, writer, how'd that happen?
I think, like most good Indian boys, there was a lot of emphasis in my family about education. And my father, actually, he was a doctor. My stepmother was a doctor. I've got an aunt who's a doctor. My sister's a doctor. So I think I was a bit of an accidental doctor, if I was anything at all.
Right, so this is your true calling then?
Yeah, I think it is.
Writing?
I think it is, and it's a nice little story, I think, almost that illustrates that. In '94, after the accident, after Senna's accident, and I think, if I'm honest, I think in that moment, I kind of knew, at some unconscious level anyway, what my calling really was. It was just a question of recognizing it. I think looking back at it, that was the real moment when the switch flicked. I think Senna probably made me a screenwriter, but it's just ironic that my first produced film was about him.
Right, that is the influence of Senna on you. In India, Formula One is still a niche sport. What is the power of Senna? What does Senna mean to the sport?
There's a great cricket match on in India. The streets are empty. It's absolutely silent. The Panwala is watching it. You can't get your shoes shined, you know? And that's kind of what Senna did in his time in Formula One. He was this incredible infusion of emotion and passion. And it really didn't matter whether you liked him, whether you didn't like him, whether he was your favorite driver, whether he was your least favorite driver. What he sort of made you do was just stop dead in your tracks and watch.
Just tell us about how you made the film, and I believe you spent hours looking at footage, about 1,000 hours of footage. How did all that happen, and how much time did it take for you to complete the film?
Well, I started on the project, believe it or not, in October 2004. And Bernie is the commercial rights holder for Formula One. Bernie has an archive in Biggin Hill in Kent, which contains every tape of every camera, of every Grand Prix practice session, qualifying session, of every race since 1982. And Bernie basically gave us the keys to the archive, which was unbelievable. And the footage that we saw in Bernie's archive, I mean, some of it no one has ever seen before. But we were also lucky because we had researchers in Japan, Italy, France, Brazil, America, Portugal, Spain, and they were sending us footage. And on top of that, the family gave us their personal archive, personal videos of Senna on a beach, Senna in a boat, Senna in his helicopter. And to be honest, I think we probably looked through somewhere, I tried to do a calculation, 3,500 and 5,000 hours of footage, and all of that was condensed into 104 minutes. I think I could have written the most beautiful script ever. I think Asif could have assembled the best cast, put together the best sets. I think we could have had an unlimited budget so we could recreate all those races. But would you have believed it was Senna? Would you have believed it was as it was? And I think the joy of it, I think, comes from the fact it's him and he's telling his own story. And I think the tragedy, the absolute pain and the loss at the end comes from the realization that that's not some actor. You're not witnessing the last 3 days of a man's life as written by Manish Pandey, not at all. What you're doing is you're witnessing the last 3 days on earth of an extraordinary human being, and it's a very powerful feeling. Senna was taken away from his fans in such a quick way, in such an immediate way. We never had time to really mourn him. And that's why I think the film is so special, because if you are a fan, you go through his life and you feel his death, and so you can mourn him. Sorry,